Wired.com presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here is your host, David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to a very special episode 200 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Some of our longtime listeners may remember that back in episode 100, our friend Matt London interviewed John Joseph Adams and me about how we got started doing this podcast. So I wanted to do something special like that for episode 200. So today on the show, John and I will be hanging out with three of our favorite Geek's Guide to the Galaxy listeners. We'll be learning more about them, hearing some of their thoughts on science fiction and podcasting, and just generally celebrating the fact that Geek's Guide to the Galaxy has somehow survived for 200 episodes. And so today we're joined by listeners Zach Chapman, Nicolette Stewart, and Bruno Hanquier. And we'll start off with Zach. So Zach, last year you were a finalist in the Writers of the Future contest, and in your acceptance speech you said, "I'd like to thank a podcast, Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. If it weren't for them, I probably wouldn't be writing science fiction because they got me back into it." So just tell us a bit about that journey of how you got interested in writing science fiction and what role the podcast played with that.
So how I got into the podcast is I was a recent grad and I had just gotten married and I just got a full-time job creating state standardized tests, and it was very not labor intensive on my brain. And so somehow I got a hold of Wastelands by JJA, and I loved all the stories in it. And so did some research and found out that he was on a podcast, and then listened to the podcast, and it was all downhill from there. I listened to like the most recent 2 or 3, and that was maybe at like episode 60 or something. And then I went back and just listened to 1 through 50 or 1 through 60, listen to all of them. And I think it really gets your mind like in the same space, like creative space of other content creators and authors. And that really was a huge benefit. I was like, I want to be like these guys. I want to write like them and create great content like them. But the people that you were interviewing, and also Dave, I had started listening to and reading some of your short stories as well at that time. And so I became like a pretty big fan right off the bat, like within 2 weeks.
Wow, I don't hear that very often. That's cool. So Zach, were you like, how big of a science fiction fan were you when you discovered the podcast?
I had been kind of a off and on. The year prior, or I guess like 2 years prior, I started reading sci-fi towards the end of college. Mainly had been into horror and fantasy, but then science fiction kind of took a step above the other genres, because I think you can be more relevant and talk about now more with science fiction. So
yeah, so were you always into short stories, or when you picked up Wastelands, was that sort of just because of the subject matter, and then you became more of a fan of short stories because that led you to other discoveries, and we talked about it on the show, and I mean because you ended up writing some short fiction with for Writers of the Future, I assume. So
right, I hadn't been into short stories, mainly novels. And when I was growing up, I had ADD and dyslexia and was not very good at reading. So most of the reading I did growing up was in video games, because I grew up at a time where they're like, now it's all voice acted, but when I was a kid I had to read everything, and they were telling stories, and that got me into, I guess, narrative. And then I think it was right at the end of high school. I think it came out in 2008, but my first experience with you, John, was the Living Dead, the zombie anthology, and I had read a few stories in there, but mainly I had just been reading novels. And then when I started that job, where I was literally working for, have you seen Stand and Deliver? With
No.
Edward James Olmos.
Mm-mm.
I was working for the main bad guys in that movie. They're like creating state standardized tests, and it was. I started listening to Nightmare and Lightspeed and Fantasy, and then I started reading a lot more as well. But mainly before that, it had just been longer form fiction, and mainly like the famous, Stephen King and Neil Gaiman. But from those anthologies, I split off into it was just a whole lot of research and reading and having fun with discovering new authors.
So is it the case, Zach, that listening to the podcast, you hadn't written any short stories before that? That's kind of sparked your interest in it altogether?
I had taken some creative writing courses. So I had written some nonfiction stuff. I hadn't written any serious sci-fi. I had attempted a novel, like when I was in high school. But again, I hadn't been reading enough. So I think, it was really with the podcast that I started branching out into shorter fiction, and then reading shorter fiction, and then writing shorter fiction. And the first serious short story that I wrote was kind of I did a flash, and then I did a kind of like a proof of concept, and then I did the Between Screens was the second one, and I tried to sell it for probably 2 years, and I was I guess I just went to the SIFWA guidelines to join, and I just went down the row, and Writers of the Future was the last one, and I had heard dubious, they're run by Scientologists, and so I was like, I'll just wait for that to be last, and I ended up getting in last year's anthology with that story.
Yeah, that's cool. So I mean, congratulations on being a finalist in Writers of the Future, which is, it's a totally legit contest, even if it is funded by Scientology. But the judges are all real authors, and it is a real accomplishment.
Yeah, they're very nice people, and I have nothing but really good things to say about everyone who runs the contest, and then also the judges. They're really great people, and if you do get into the contest, they fly you out, and they do a bunch of workshopping with you, very intensive. There's only like 12 other people, so a lot of good things to say about those guys.
And then kind of what have you been up to since then?
I've been working on a couple things. I recently sold an option to Talisman Films, and it's a speculative TV series is what they want to option it into. And I've been working with them, but I can't give out details more than that.
Is this an option on your short story from Writers of the Future?
No, it's not.
Oh, something else.
Yes. And then I have a story coming out in Futuristica. And then I'm working on a pro rates anthology, and half of them are reprints and half of them are new stories. And my dad's also, we're splitting it 50-50 on paying the authors. And I've got reprints from Robert Silverberg and Sean Williams And then I got a news story from Martin L. Shoemaker, and he's Nebula nominated this year for Today I Am Paul, which is like a legit story. You can listen to it for free on Clark's World, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that sounds great, and I want to get Nicolette in here. So Nicolette, back in 2013, you posted on your blog, "Wouldn't it be the coolest thing ever to get a call from Geek's Guide to the Galaxy to be one of the consulting geeks on their oh-so-delicious podcast? Yes. Oh my god, yes." So would you say now that all your dreams have come true?
All of my dreams have come true. I can die now. Thank you so much, David.
Well, so tell us a little bit about just why were you interested in appearing on the podcast?
Oh, well, I love it, and I like to talk too, so I was always like, oh, maybe someday I can go on. That would be awesome. Because, when I started listening, I guess like 4 years ago-ish, I just, listened to everything in a binge of a couple months, and I just really, really enjoy what you guys have been doing here, so...
Yeah, all right, cool. And so then Nicolette also blogs about lots of things that aren't Geek's Guide to the Galaxy over at bookpunks.com. So everyone go check that out. And then I want to get Bruno in here as well. So Bruno is our #1 crowdfunder, except for my mom. I always have to, every time I mention that Bruno's our #1 crowdfunder, my mom's always like, no, actually it's me. So like, hi mom. But aside from my mom, Bruno's our #1 crowdfunder.
I bow to your mom, of course.
But so Bruno, I'm just curious, like, why did you want to be such a big supporter of the podcast? Like, what was it about it that made you want to do that?
First of all, I didn't think at the time that it was such a big deal, to tell you the truth. I was really fascinated by the way you were interviewing. Well, first of all, by the amazing authors that you had on your podcast, even though, as everybody knows, a couple of them are missing, right? Neil Gaiman, Stephen King.
We're working on it.
The Holy Trinity or more. But I was really, really fascinated to see that. I think I told you that I started listening, I think, because of your interview with China Miéville, whom I had never read at the time. I was like turning around, thinking that he might be a very difficult author. As you probably can hear, I'm not English speaking. I'm not an English speaker. I'm French. And I've been reading in English for a long time now, but sometimes it takes a toll on you. And I was thinking that China Miéville might be like this. So it was very interesting to hear him talking about his book. And I was fascinated by his intelligence and by the way you were interviewing him, which was basically letting him say what he had to say until the end. Because too often I think interviewers have a tendency to cut the people they interview and not let them go through their whole process. And then I looked back on the backlog and I was even more amazed. So I thought, oh my God, I want more. I need more. Let them go on.
I mean, so even, being French, you had this apparently like really extensive exposure to English language, fantasy, and science fiction.
Yep, I did.
Like, how did that come about?
I think it came from my will to read Tolkien in his own language at the beginning, probably. Yeah, I think because I'd read in French The Lord of the Ring like 10 or 15 times when I reached 20 years, and then I thought, okay, now I want to read the real stuff. Because there are different things in Tolkien. There is a poetry. I know that you guys don't like Tom Bombadil. I love the character. I love this passage. I love it. I find it very well. I haven't read it in a while, I must admit. But I think that there is a poetry in this book. It's like a pause, and that was something that I wanted to experience.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if you've read Lord of the Rings in French 10 or 15 times and then you read it in English, are there other differences other than just the rhythm of the language? Like, did they change anything for the French translation?
Not that I'm aware of. No, I couldn't say. In the story, nothing really. It's.
You know what? I'm sorry to jump in, but what's the giant spider's name? Because they changed it in German and it pisses me off so much But I have to know if they kept it. Is her name Shelob in French, or did they change it?
Oh wow, I really can't tell you. I don't remember at all. It's been it's been 28 years.
Okay, sorry.
Wait, so what is it in German?
Punkte. I don't ask me why they changed it, because I hate when they change names, but I mean, Shelob, it's not, why?
Yeah, that's really weird.
Yeah, it's actually interesting, some of the things that get changed in different languages sometimes when they translate things. Like, with me being a short story editor, one of the things I encounter is sometimes the foreign publisher wants to, like, not include certain stories, like one story or another in the translated edition, because, like, they feel like, oh, well, our audience isn't going to understand this, or this is not going to resonate with them. And I always find it disappointing, and I always fight back against that whenever that happens, because it's like, well, the way they're going to get exposed to it is to put it into an anthology like this, where they can sample it. It's like not a whole novel on this subject or whatever, and like just let them try to experience this culture that they maybe don't fully understand, because maybe the story is very American type story, and if you don't live in America and you don't speak English, maybe it's harder to understand it or something. But I mean, I think that's just a challenge that I wish more publishers would be willing to embark on it and trust the audience will enjoy that discovery. I mean, that's not quite the same thing as just changing a name in a book for no reason, but it is a curious artifact of translations that comes up now and then.
Definitely. I mean, translating culture is a whole nother can of worms. But why would you change? Frodo is not Frodo Baggins in the German version. They translated his last name to mean little bag in German. So it's Frodo Whitelin. And like, why? Come on.
Yeah. I have an answer to you, actually. They changed the name. They did. It used to be Arachne, which would make sense, kind of, and now it's Araignée, which is like a shortened version of spider, which doesn't have any meaning per se, but so they changed it. And Bilbo Baggins has a different name also, which I don't remember.
Okay.
Well, I mean, so Bruno, from talking to you, I know that in addition to France, you've also lived in Spain and Turkey and all over the place. Have you encountered a lot of other fantasy and science fiction fans in your life?
Well, they come and go, like everything in life, but yeah, of course. Most of the things I've read, my first source when I was younger was mainly a bookshop, a big huge, bookshop in Paris called La Fnac, where you had a special section, of course, for sci-fi, and the people working there were very helpful at the time and helped me discover like Zelazny and people like that whom I didn't know, or even Philip K. Dick. But apart from that, most of the books I've read were from people who told me, you have to know that. But it's hardly ever big fans. Like, I must say, at this point in my life, 99.9% of what I read in terms of literature is sci-fi or fantasy, and mainly sci-fi. I don't think I know anybody else like me at this point in my life, at least.
I mean, are you involved do you follow any other websites or podcasts or anything about science fiction, or is it just all Geek's Guide to the Galaxy?
Oh, of course, it's all about you. What else do you need? Come on.
Okay, that's a good. I like that answer.
Yeah, I know you like that answer. There's a little bit on IO9 also, I must say, from time to time. It's mainly about comics, which I'm not a big reader of, but they can give you hints of things to read also on IO9.
Oh, I was just going to say, speaking of comics, it just reminded me, because also I have this Silver Surfer poster just right in my office here, and so it's sort of in the periphery of my vision. But I don't know if you guys saw the Eisner nominations for this year were released, and so just like last week or something. And so I noticed that Silver Surfer was on there, and I was surprised, because it's like, oh, I mean, I loved Silver Surfer. It was sort of one of my gateway drugs into science fiction. But I was pleased to see, like, oh, hey, there's like a good run of Silver Surfer happening. I should go try to catch up with it. that's just sort of a way of saying I'm doing this book that's coming out next year with Saga, and I shouldn't say what it is yet because it hasn't been formally announced, but it's very influenced by Silver Surfer and the other sort of cosmic cosmic storylines of the Marvel universe. And so I ended up I dedicated the book to some of the creators that had worked on those titles back in the day that were important to me. And so I was telling my wife about this, and it was so funny because it was like I didn't really put all of this sort of emotion into it when I did it. I was like, oh, I think this would be cool to do because like acknowledge these people who helped shape my sort of my brain a little bit. And then so when I was telling my wife about it though, like I just got all emotional about it, and I was like I couldn't even get through the sentence as I was saying it. Yeah, it was just kind of a really cool experience to have like done it and then like realize like how much it actually meant to me to be doing it.
Is your wife in the same? Does she have the same background as you? Is she a geek also?
Yeah. Actually, she was our first Geek's Guide to the Galaxy pod turn. That's actually one of the ways that we got together. Like she and I got together is because Dave and I were looking for a volunteer to come on the show and help us do create the show notes and such. And we stopped doing that at some point, but at the beginning we were doing show notes. So she volunteered. I had met her at the World Fantasy Convention prior to that. And but then we hadn't really stayed in touch. I just like met her at the bar one night at the convention, and then so she when we put out the call for the interns, she volunteered, and so she started working with us there, and then I was founding Lightspeed around that time, and so since she was so enthusiastic and so good at doing everything on Geek's Guide, I asked her, well, hey, would you be interested in helping with Lightspeed? And so things sort of snowballed from there. And, so she, we started talking a lot more and our, relationship sort of formed from there. But yeah, I mean, and then like she actually has probably more of a comic book background than me. I mean, like, I certainly read tons of comics when I was young, but I mean, like she was like super, super into them and like actually wanted to write comics. And now she actually is writing and editing comics. She's working for a small press called Chimera Press. And that's just new. That just started fairly recently.
Well, and Christy was also the first guest geek that we ever had on Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Right. Back in episode 42, we wanted to talk about Douglas Adams.
Yeah.
And she's a big Douglas Adams fan. And so that was the first time it wasn't just John and me talking.
Oh my God, is she a big Douglas Adams fan? Like, goodness. Like, okay, so like I read those books when I was like, 10 or 11, something like that. And I remember like the summer I read those, and it was like important to me, But because I was going sort of through a tough time, like, I had a stepfather who was a jerk, and so I was like punished all the time and everything. And so like those books were important to me because they helped me get through that. But even with that, like being in my history, it's like you've never met somebody who knows Douglas Adams like Christy. Like, I mean, she quotes him all the time. She drops these references, and I look at her blankly, and she's like, "Oh, from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy." And I just feel like such a fake geek all the time. It's like she drops all these references, and I don't know what she's talking about. But like, she knows it inside and out. So
I feel for you. Actually, John, I'd forgotten one important. I don't know if it's a source of sci-fi information, but I listen also to Lightspeed podcast.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear.
Regularly.
Yeah,
like,
good.
All the time.
Yeah, awesome. Well, everyone else should do that too if you like Geek's Guide.
Yeah.
That is an excellent source of science fiction. Okay, Zach, I had one other thing I wanted to ask you about because I was talking to my friend Matt London recently, and he said that he actually ran into you in Texas. Could you tell us that story?
Yeah, so I was sitting eating a pizza outside at a restaurant during Texas Book Festival, and my wife is a librarian, and so she was working at the festival, and she had just gotten off, and I had seen his picture from him being on the podcast, and I had followed him on Twitter, and I was like, I think that's Matt London. And he had a tag on, and as he walked by, I saw it, and I was like, hey, you're Matt London. And I kind of introduced myself to him, probably pretty awkwardly. And then he had a panel, and I listened to the panel. and it had, I think, the guy who did Holes as well. Is that Louis Laurie? Yeah,
Louis
and he
Sakar,
was on
isn't
it. I think so. It was a great panel, and then I talked to him for a little bit on the way to his book signing. Kind of buzzed around. I didn't want to be too annoying, and then bought his book and he signed it. So.
Yeah, no, you definitely weren't too annoying. I mean, that really made his day. I mean, he's like, wow, somebody came up and recognized me in public. I was like, what the, who are you? What's going on? Because, you don't get a lot of recognition. You don't get recognized in public a lot as a science fiction author / podcaster. Although it's funny, actually, I went to my cousin's wedding last year, and there was a guy there who would listen to the podcast. He's like, oh my God, I know who you are. And that was I think only about the second or third time someone who I had no connection with just recognized me randomly like that.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say it was your cousin that recognized you. It's like, oh, right, I know who you are.
You're internet famous. Your cousin recognizes you.
I'm known to about 90% of my family.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I was so amazed by this story of Zach running into Matt London, because it's like, I mean, like it does seem like so implausible to happen. Like, I mean, unless like you reach a certain level of fame, and it's like, I have like a couple dozen books out at this point, and my picture is pretty common online and stuff. Is like, I mean, I can't imagine anybody actually recognize me. And this was like even when I was like living in New Jersey, and so I was like in New York City very frequently. I mean, like I would be on the subway and I'd see people reading. I'd just be excited to see people reading a genre book. Let alone, and I had no hope that I would ever see somebody reading one of my books. Although I did always get very excited when somebody else reported to me that they saw somebody reading one of my books on like the subway or something. But just like to have somebody like recognize you as you were like walking by or something like that would freak me out, I think.
Well, it's funny because my girlfriend Stephanie came with me to my cousin's wedding, and so there's this guy there who recognized me, and then later when I wasn't around, he was talking to Stephanie, and he said, "Did you know how famous Dave was when you met him?" And so I thought that was nice. Well, so how about Nicolette? Have you ever like met any authors in person or gone to any conventions or workshops or anything like that?
Yeah, my first convention was World Fantasy in Brighton in 2013, I guess that was. So, lots of them. I mean, you go and hang out. I was like, one of my favorite pictures that I have on my bookshelf is me and Patrick Rothfuss looking epic. It's awesome. So yeah, I guess I've encountered many of the usual suspects at that. I went to the LoneCon. Was that 2 years ago already? It feels like not that long ago. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to Helsinki as well.
And how about Bruno? Have you met any fantasy or science fiction authors face to face, or gone to any conventions or fan clubs or anything like that?
No, full disclosure, I used to work in editing when I was 25, something like that, and I had to go to book fairs and stuff like that where we were representing our very interesting books. Sorry, it was mainly adaptations for children of something like encyclopedias and stuff like that. And it was pretty boring, actually. And I kept very, very bad memories of those events. So I was never... It's not something that appeals to me, I must tell you.
Why did you have bad memories of those events?
Because they were very boring.
Uh-huh.
For me, I mean...
Yeah,
and it was not sci-fi. I mean, so, but I kind of associated it together, I guess. I'm not even sure that there's anything like this in Paris, to tell you the truth. Do you know of anything like this?
Well, you've never been to a party until you've been to a science fiction fan party.
I'm sure. My next trip has to be to the US again. I mean, I haven't been there for ages, so.
Yeah, no, Bruno, come hang out in New York. We'll show you like the most rockin' time you've ever seen.
I have no doubt.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't actually know what opportunities there might be in Paris. But if any of our listeners know of any science fiction stuff in Paris, shoot us an email at geeksgalaxy@gmail.com, and we'll pass that on to Bruno.
Thank you.
So he can get hooked up with the scene.
Yep.
But I mean, honestly, a lot of like book events are kind of boring, even if you're into it. I mean, that just kind of comes with the territory, because I go to a lot of readings and I've been to a lot of panels on conventions, and a lot of them are actually pretty boring. I mean, that's why the writers usually end up just hanging out in the bar with each other rather than attending the panels.
Well, I think it's like really interesting at first, and then you sort of get to the point where it's like, okay, well, these panels are all sort of variations on a theme, because like, I mean, how many different panel topics can you come up with for a convention? Because it's like, they do the conventions for the people who aren't necessarily going to be able to go to every single one. And of course, if you go to a big con like Worldcon, you can only go to so many panels because they're programmed to, they're scheduled against each other. And so, so maybe, over the course of a couple of years, you can basically end up seeing all of the different panel variations. But then at that, even if you were that diligent about it, it's like, you're probably going to get bored of panels eventually. But I mean, yeah, it's like, I think a lot of people go, like, I mean, the reason I still like to go is for interacting with, just, with friends in the community and meeting fans and that kind of thing. Like, like at this point, like, I would much rather do like a coffee clutch or some kind of thing where I get to just interact with fans directly rather than like do a panel or something. Cause it's like, I mean, even just like from a marketing point of view, it's like, is anybody going to go run out and buy my book because like they saw me say something smart in a panel or something? Probably not. Even if it's directly on the subject. What's that?
Yes, they will.
Well, okay.
Okay,
well.
maybe I'm a total freak because I fucking. Oh, am I allowed to curse? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I fucking love the panels. And I've bought so many books based on that, probably including yours, not from panels, but from listening to the show.
Right. Well, I think on the podcast it's a little bit different, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's always possible. I guess I kind of have some bad memories of panels, like cases where like I alienated the whole room just by having an opinion. I mean, it was like sort of, I did a panel on Battlestar Galactica, and it was like, and they were talking about the difference between the original Battlestar and like the contemporary one, the more recent one in the, that Ron Moore produced. And that was before the finale of that, where I was like a super fan of it. And then later I soured on it because I hated the finale so much. But I was like a super fan of it at the time. And I just assumed that everyone acknowledged that the first Battlestar Galactica was garbage and was not worthy of like talking about. Because I was like, well, obviously the new Battlestar is the shit and the old one's just shit. And I don't remember what I said, but like, oh man, did the room turn on me when I made that opinion clear. So I was like, all right, no more media panels. I clearly am not. I don't have my finger on the pulse of that stuff. Like, I'm going to stick to book related panels, but I didn't sell any books at that one, I'm pretty sure.
Well, that makes me wonder. I mean, like, so Zach, for example, do you listen to the podcast and then have you discovered new authors that now you're a huge fan of and you go out and buy all their books and stuff like that?
Yes. Paolo Bacigalupe, he was like one of the first ones. But that was a mix between listening to People of Sand and Slag and then also hearing about you interview him on The Wind-Up Girl, I think. And
that was episode 2.
Yeah, episode 2.
Yeah, wow, it's been a while. But yeah, I really like him. I believe Tim Pratt, you had talked about kind of like a Twilight Zone style story that he wrote. And I haven't read any of his novels, but I just ended up getting a couple of his collections, and I like Tim Pratt quite a bit.
Was it Impossible Dreams that we talked about? Was that it? The alternate reality about the video store?
Yeah, I think it's in Other Worlds Than These.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the one. And of course, so I read that, and I really loved that. And then I got him mixed up with Tim Powers, who I also read and really liked, but he's much more of like a novel type person.
Yeah,
and
a little bit different, those two.
Very different, yeah.
Well, because Tim Pratt was one of my Clarion classmates. He's a terrific short story writer and very prolific. And then Tim Powers he's a brilliant writer, but he like hates writing short stories. He's only written, I think, like 12 short stories in his entire career or something like that. And Tim writes 12 short stories like a month. So there's a pretty drastic difference between the two. And how about Bruno? Any favorite new authors you've discovered from listening to the podcast?
Absolutely, David Mitchell, whom I'd never read before either. It was a little bit the same story as China Miéville. I was turning around him. Cloud Atlas seemed like a huge endeavor, so I was a little bit holding back. And after listening to his interview, I started with Slade House, and I think I've read everything that he's written now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I tend to do that. And Leakey also, I really like her on it's a different style. I mean, it's a different emotion, but I find it very, very interesting though what she did with the she, even though it might seem gimmicky, it sticks on my mind all the time. Probably a lot of others,
Well, it's funny, speaking of David Mitchell, I met a guy in New York recently, Greg, and he's a big David Mitchell fan. I think he said he just read all his books, and he said he's listened to all the interviews he's done. And he said, I never knew he was a big Dungeons & Dragons player until I listened to your interview with him. So that's my contribution to David Mitchell.
Lore.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Geek's Guide's all about, is exposing the secret geeks among us.
Well, no, it's really cool for me to just be able to interview like big scientists and stuff and ask them, so do you like science fiction? And oftentimes they do, and they never get asked about it. And that's, whenever I see an interview with anyone, I want them to ask, well, do you like science fiction? And they never do. So this is my chance to finally do that.
So when you ask them that and they hate it and they say no, and you just cut that out and pretend like it never happened so that you don't have to have them disappoint the audience.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, because we do edit these shows a lot, and so like John was saying, like a lot of panels are boring when you go to see them at conventions because they're live and maybe they're not that great. But on the show, it helps a lot because you can edit stuff out. So if anything's really boring, it's just like nobody ever has to listen to it except me.
Except, well, the other thing is that at conventions, they're fan run generally, and so which is fine. I mean, they take it seriously, but then sometimes there's so many panels and so many people participating. Sometimes the moderators that get chosen aren't necessarily that knowledgeable about a subject, and of course it varies because it's volunteers. It varies how much effort each person puts into the moderation. Whereas Dave, he's like the most serious moderator like in existence. It's like he like does so much research on every single topic and every single like interview and everything. It's like really incredible. And so, that definitely contributes to it. Although of course being able to edit out boring stuff helps as well. And you guys wouldn't have ever had the opportunity to witness anything like this, but and I hadn't either really, but I stayed with Dave back in November of last year for a bit, and so he was actually editing an episode while I was there, and so I never actually witnessed him watched him do it, I don't think, and so it was really kind of amazing and also slightly appalling because he was editing me because I was on the episode. And so I was like, oh my God, I don't want to hear myself anymore. It's like, how can you even stand it? How do you even want to talk to me? But just watching him do it, just over and over, listen to the same thing over and over and over so he can cut out the right stupid boring parts and verbal fumbling. I just did it there just to make it easy for him to find it in this episode. You can edit this part.
But yeah, that's why I only put out one show a week. I don't know. I'm just curious. Do you guys have any questions for us? Like anything that you've just been wanting to know this whole time and you never had a chance to ask or anything? I don't know, Nicolette. Do you have any questions you've always been wanting to ask about Geek's Guide to the Galaxy?
Are you ever gonna put the two halves back together again? I missed the panel and the interview.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, honestly, it's made my life a lot easier, so much easier splitting them up. But yeah, I don't know. How do you other guys feel about splitting up the show? Bruno, what did you think about that?
I liked it because I have my injection more often, even if it's a different one. And I actually I kind of get confused when there is one thing after the other. If the topics are very different, I can mix up the episodes in my mind, if you will. Because 1 hour is already quite a lot, huh?
Yeah.
Actually.
Well, no, it got to be so challenging putting the two things together because what would happen is, you're trying to schedule an interview and then somebody doesn't get back to you, and you try to schedule it with somebody else and they don't get back to you, and you try to schedule it with somebody else and they don't get back to you. And then you can't then start preparing for or recording the panel until you know who the guest is going to be, because you're trying to make them go together. So it just got to be such a nightmare. So that's one of the main reasons that we ended up splitting it up.
Yeah, and I mean, I totally get why people might miss that, because I really did enjoy that aspect of the show early on where, we would have the interview guest on, and then we would go and we would talk about whatever topic at more length and, and with a specific focus. But yeah, I mean, that it started to really limit the guests that we could even line up, because we're like, okay, well, we can have this person on, that would be great, but then what would we talk about in the related panel? Because we always tried to have the panels related for a long time. And then there would be episodes where it's like, oh, well, how am I going to learn enough about that topic? It's like, that makes sense to do as the panel, but how am I going to learn enough about that topic in order to actually talk about it and not sound like an idiot? And of course, when I stopped being 100% co-host, and then eventually dropped out as co-host and just became a producer, that made things easier too, because then only Dave had to be knowledgeable about it and not me also. Which always made things challenging.
Yeah, so the answer to that one is no.
Oh, well. I can dream.
I have a question I've been dying to ask you for the last 2 weeks.
Okay.
Did you see Batman versus Superman? And if you did, how much did you hate that movie?
Yeah, I did see it because, it was funny because I interviewed Glenn Weldon, who wrote this book about Batman a couple episodes ago. And so I figured I would want to talk to him about that movie. So I had to go see it. And I had seen on his website that he was going to have seen it. But then when I got him on the phone, it turned out he hadn't been able to see it after all. So that whole trip to the movie theater turned out to be a total waste of time. But yeah, it wasn't good. I mean, I wouldn't even say I hated it, actually. I mean, I just thought it just wasn't good. And it just stayed not good for a really, really, really long time. And then it was over. The thing that sticks, I mean, because I'm not a huge superhero comic person, so I don't know all the backstory about this, but there's this scene where there's insect aliens and the Superman Nazis, and I had absolutely no idea what was going on there. It just seems like I wondered if if they had just switched to a different movie when I wasn't paying attention or something.
Even the fans like me had no idea what was going on there. So,
I have not seen it. Me and my wife were actually interested in it, because it's elements of it looked interesting, but then I don't know, we didn't get to go see it right away, and then by the time other people had seen it, it just it seemed like such an outpouring of hate for it. They were like, I don't know if we want to make the trip out for it, because it's we don't want to spend the money and take the and it's to go to the good movie theater where we would go see a movie. It's probably an hour round trip, for us. So it's a bit of a event to go do that. And, so we're like, if we have a high probability of it being a crappy movie, maybe we'll skip it.
Yeah, you shouldn't watch that movie.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about that one and Man of Steel too, but when I watch them, I don't feel like I'm watching a movie. I feel like I'm reading a Cliff's Notes summary of a movie, and so the events are happening, but I'm not feeling any emotional impact from them, and I don't know why exactly that is, but it's definitely I just don't feel any emotions at all while watching those two movies.
I felt an emotion, but it wasn't what they wanted me to feel. I think it's just scenes. There's no narrative flow to any of it, especially this last one. But the Glenn Weldon interview, I was going to add him to someone that I really want to read because I'm a comic book fan and he seemed extremely knowledgeable. So I'll definitely be reading anything he is publishing. So
Yeah, no, he's a lot of fun to talk to. Although, like, speaking of technical issues, I mean, I had a really, really bad Skype connection when I was talking to him. So literally, like, half of what he said, I couldn't even hear. It was just dead silent. So I was just kind of guessing what he had said for a lot of it.
Yeah.
And fortunately, he had recorded his audio, so I was able to edit it together. But just when you're talking about like why editing is so important, you know, there was like the unedited version of that was completely unlistenable. And it's actually, there's a funny story I have about that too, because when I interviewed Andy Weir, you know, and it took a long time to set that up because he was really busy doing interviews around the time the Martian movie came out. And so we had it all set up. It was all set up to go. And I wake up that morning and it's, you know, I'm going to be interviewing him in 2 or 3 hours. And I have an email from him and it says, "Did you see that there's a worldwide Skype outage today?" And I was like, oh, come on. That can't be real. You know, and I log into Skype and it's not working. And I was like, oh my God. So I emailed him and I said, okay, I've never used Google Talk before, but I think I can figure it out in the next 2 hours. And so I set it up, I figure it all out, and I try calling him on his phone. And it sounds good. And he says, okay, I have to do another interview now. And I'm like, all right, well, we're all set. So then, you know, an hour later I call him back and I'm like, hey, Andrew, you there? And he's like, bzz, 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 bzz.
Oh God.
And I was like, no. Unfortunately, I think we were able to get him on his cell phone or something, so the audio quality wasn't the best, but it worked out in the end. But yeah, there's just a lot of stuff like that when you do a podcast like this. But anyway, so Bruno, do you have any questions you've been always dying to ask?
Oh yes, there is one. One day on Twitter, Joss Whedon. I got a message saying that Joss Whedon had followed me. So maybe one first question would be, what does it mean? I've never understood, but never mind. But I said I could die that day because I'm a huge fan of Joss Whedon. Why don't you have him on your list?
I would totally have Joss Whedon. I mean, I just assumed he would not give us the time of day. But I mean, maybe sometime. I mean, like the big Hollywood people like that tend to be really a challenge to get. I mean, we're only able to get them if they have a book that came out and the publisher can set us up with an interview through that. But hey, producer, how come you haven't set us up with Joss Whedon yet? What's your problem?
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm pretty sure that we did try to get him at some point, and yeah, we didn't get anywhere with it. I mean, obviously, he's somebody that we would love to have on. Yeah, the bigger the person is, and the more like in Hollywood land they are, and he's obviously very firmly in Hollywood land. It makes it much more difficult to even find out how to attempt to get them, let alone actually get them. So, and unfortunately, almost all of our contacts are just in book publishing, and so we can reach out to these people, and we can at least get an answer on most authors and such. But even if it's not always yes, but.
Ask Chris Williams. I'm sure he has a contact.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, that is one thing that I've tried before in the past, and like trying to get friends of a friend to sort of set it up. I mean, but yeah.
A lot of these guests, though, even though we've interviewed them, we have no way to contact them because the publicist sets us up with a phone number where they're at a hotel or something because they're on a tour or something, and then you call the hotel and you do the interview, and then you don't have any way to contact them afterwards. So it's not even necessarily we could get in touch with anyone we've had on the show who would know somebody.
Yeah, although there are a few cases where it's like some famous person and we ended up calling them, like, and it was like at their house because like they didn't have Skype or whatever, and it's like, well, that would be awkward to just like call them up and like, hey, remember when I interviewed you that time? That was fun, wasn't it? Hey, could you give me like Joss Whedon's phone number? Like.
Well, that's the thing, too. Like, when I first started doing this, I very naively thought that everyone I interviewed would become my friend and remember me and stuff like that. And, like, a lot of these people, I mean, they're doing, like, 8 interviews a day. They have absolutely, like, a year later, they have absolutely no idea who you are.
Yeah.
So.
But I was very impressed that you got, I don't remember his name, Sense8, Babylon 5.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, J. Michael Straczynski, yeah.
Yeah, it was hard to get that one. We had to really dig around to make that happen, but I mean that was really cool.
Yeah, it was. I adore Sense8. I'm a big fan also. I mean, we've been talking about books all the time now.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there are series and very interesting ones on coming from America.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm sure you guys all heard the Sensei episode that we had. In addition to the Straczynski interview, we also did that roundtable interview, and I mean, obviously, I loved Sensei like
Oh yeah,
so
you
much.
loved it as much as I did.
Yeah. And I, totally didn't expect to, but I mean, I totally did. Yeah, my wife and I were just talking about like, oh, we might need to do our 5th rewatch of it here soon because just getting that itch again.
Yep.
Nicolette, any other questions? Since I gave you such an unsatisfying answer for the last one.
I don't know. I think we can set up some interviews from Beyond the Grave. Get Philip K. Dick and Ian Banks on the show for a special Halloween seance episode.
Yeah, there is a podcast. I haven't listened to it, but there's a podcast called Dead Authors where they have, I think it's more of a comedy podcast, but they have actors impersonating different, deceased authors.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Philip K. Dick. I mean, one thing that Dave and I actually did talk about at some point, I was like, oh man, I wish that Philip K. Dick android hadn't gotten lost, because wouldn't that be cool to set up an interview with that android? Because it's like I mean, as I understand it, they had like sort of programmed it with all of like these Philip K. Dick interviews, so like it can kind of talk like him, And so it's like, that would just be amazing. It would be super awkward, I'm sure. Like, it probably doesn't really work as well as it sounds like it does. But, like, that would have been so cool to just try. And then it's like, because it's Philip K. Dick, that would have made so much sense to do.
Yes, that would have been amazing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, even more Philip K. Dick fashion, the android, like, disappeared,
Was it really an android, though?
Right. Who knows? I mean, the head was definitely detached, so I have to assume. But yeah, because I think the head is what disappeared. I think they probably didn't lose the body, but they definitely lost the head.
It's funny though, because I mean, Roger Zelazny is my favorite author, and I want to interview him so much. But I mean, he died a long time ago. But it honestly has crossed my mind to take a audio interview that he did and just record myself asking the questions.
Oh my God, April Fool's episode where.
Yeah, you should just do it for yourself, like just to have it in your archive. Just that make you feel good to have that done.
I do honestly, on my wall here, I have a picture of I photoshopped of Roger Zelazny like standing next to me.
Not with your head on top. I got scared for a while.
Well, you should use that as a publicity photo. Like I will say that I have seen there was an author online who was photoshopping himself into photos with famous authors as if he was signing with them. So like it made him look like he was famous because he was signing right next to whoever. But he forgot to Photoshop in the legs is the problem under the table. Like you could see that his legs weren't there.
All right, so while we're on the topic of funny stories, actually, I have John has a funny story I wanted him to tell. So, John, tell your cat story.
Okay, yeah. So we have 4 cats now, and at some point there's this cattery cat shelter in the town that I live in, and so we would go down there periodically, and we look at cats, and my wife's a bit of a sucker for the sad case cats, the most damaged animals that they have, it's like the hyperbole and a half thing where it's like, show them to me, give me your most damaged animals, and I will take it. And so we went down there and, we saw this one, like, great cat, and his name was Yoda, which is, like, perfect. We actually already have a cat named Chewbacca, and of course we love Star Wars, so, like, Yoda, and, he was just, very thin. I mean, he actually almost looked like Gollum, really, even though his name was Yoda. He was more of a Gollum in appearance, because he was, very sickly. He, was very, very gaunt. But he was very nice, and so we hung out with him a bit at the cattery, and when we went home, but then we went back and we decided, let's get Yoda. We're going to adopt him. And so they went to go find him, and they were chasing him around because he was being very squirrely. He even though previously he had been very docile and everything, but so they catch him and they give him to us, and we take him home. And so we kept him in isolation for a while, and my wife has an office in the house, and so we just kept him in isolation there, to acclimate him to the house and the other cats. But so, one thing that became very clear right away, even though he was by himself, he wasn't dealing with other cats. It's he didn't really seem like Yoda. It's behavior was very, very, sort of standoffish, he wouldn't let you touch him. And, we're well, I mean, I know it's like he's sick. He, he has some like parasites and stuff. A lot of the cats that come out of the cat shelter have parasites. And but anyway, we're like, okay, well, we tried to accommodate and everything. But so because of these parasites, we're like, okay, well, we need to take the cat to the vet. And so, my wife, went in the office and tried to corral him, and, cat just freaked out and like scratched her and bit her, right? And so, like bit her so bad, like right on the sort of the skin between her thumb and her index finger, that she like dug in right there, and like it went right through. So she got like poisoned basically. Like the cat's mouth was so toxic that her hand swelled up like a lobster claw, and like she had to go get antibiotics. I mean, and it literally like was a serious situation. Like, she had to go to the emergency room. So basically this cat tried to kill her. And just as a PSA, anybody, if you get bit by a cat, like go to the doctor. Like seriously, like don't screw around. Like go to the doctor, because like their mouths can be really toxic. So that happened. But we did eventually get the cat into the cat carrier, and we got it to the vet and everything. And my wife was fine. She recovered fine. So we have the cat back, and the cat still seems like, okay, even after the vet and after the medicine has happened, it's like, yeah, it's still like, it doesn't seem like the same cat. And then so I go back to the cattery, because actually, when I was doing the Kickstarter for Help Fund My Robot Army, which is an anthology I was doing, I wanted to do a video, but I didn't want to like talk on a video because like it was awkward, and I tried doing it and I couldn't do it. So I was like, I know, I'm going to exploit cats. And so I made a catsploitation video. I went to the cattery and I just asked them, could I shoot some video of the cats, and I would talk over, I would do some narration for my Kickstarter video, but then people could just watch cats while I'm talking, because I figured that would be more fun. And so we went down there again, and so we had shot some video of the cat at home, and we're like, oh hey, so like look, Yoda's talking, and he's like sort of coming around, and they were like, so that's not Yoda. So what happened was they actually gave us the wrong cat. So the cat came from this like litter of cats. This one family, I guess they had all these cats, and they were all like super inbred, and like they just never got them fixed and everything. So it was just like this, inbreeding, like free for all over there. And so they had several cats from this litter. And so they gave us, his sister. And so that's the cat that we took home, and Yoda was still actually at the cattery. And so, when we found that out, we actually ended up taking Yoda home as well. And then so now we have Yoda, the actual Yoda, the real Yoda, and then we have his sister, who we named Cora, which, as in short for Coraline, which is kind of appropriate because she's like the other cat, like Coraline had like the other mother. And there was something very Gaiman-esque about the whole situation, so it seemed kind of appropriate. Now we have both of them, and Cora actually, even though she tried to kill my wife, she's actually come around a long way. Like now she's like rehabilitated. She was basically feral at the time. And she's very much a nice cat now, and she's, we can pet her and everything. And Yoda, and both she and Yoda are actually totally healthy at this point. They were both full of parasites and everything when we first got them, but now they're both healthy. Actually, Yoda, they had said, was unadoptable because he was so sick. But now he's just several $1,000s later, he's fine now, but, he's good. And actually,
wasn't the cat allergic to its own teeth or something like that?
Oh, well, yeah, Yoda, the actual Yoda, eventually, he had to have all of his teeth removed, because his gums were sort of, like treating his teeth like an infection or whatever, or like, it was like his body rebelling against his teeth, and so his teeth, so he has no teeth now, and it's like the cutest thing to watch him yawn, because he just yawns and he doesn't have any teeth.
So if you want to know why John is too busy to be a full-time co-host on the podcast, because of shit like that.
Yeah, we actually thought that Yoda was going to have diapers. Like, we thought we were going to have to diaper him because he was just like, he was so damaged. But, he's all cured now, so.
Yeah, the force is strong in his family.
Indeed. Oh, so I have a question for Zach, if I can.
Yeah, go for it.
So Zach, so you mentioned you wrote standardized tests. Have you ever written a story, or like is your Writers of the Future story or anything? Is any of your stories like influenced by writing tests? Because one of my favorite stories of all time is The Death Bird by Harlan Ellison, and that sort of starts off in the form of a test, like where the story is being told in that format. Have you played around with that at all?
No, but there is a really good story in The Wastelands 2.
Oh yeah, right.
A test. I forget who wrote it, but that was a really good story.
Yeah, that was Megan Arkenberg. Yeah.
No, I didn't. I mainly, so people would mark up the edits, and I was like the middleman that didn't need to be there. Like, I just did what the markups were. It's like, why don't you just do it yourself? I don't know. But so, well, for half of it, and then my second half, I was programming logic for computerized tests, so it was much more brain intensive. But I was already addicted to Geek's Guide by then, so yeah, not too many interesting stories. That's like a really boring. That's like working for the man. Like, yeah, I work from home now, so it's like so much better than going to work every day and like pretending like you're working. But the flip side is you can't pretend like you're working when you're at home. Like, that's impossible. You have to work.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question to you and David, and maybe even John and Nicolette? I don't know, but sorry, David and Zach. David, you mentioned your mother being your first financer.
Yeah.
And Zach, you mentioned your father also being part of your endeavor in your anthology. Is it something? What kind of support do they have? Are they geeks themselves? Why are they involved in your work? Apart from being your parents?
For me, no, my dad is like, he's a patent attorney, so he's really sciencey, but absolutely not a geek. He's like full jock mode. So, but he was just interested in like helping my writing career and editing and that sort of thing. So, yeah, and then we're splitting it 50-50, and then anything that if we actually make money off of it, then it'll be split 50-50 between him and I.
And then, yeah, in my case, my parents are big fantasy and science fiction fans. I mean, they read fantasy and science fiction books to me growing up, and that's really how I got into it in the first place. And they've always just been really, really supportive. I mean, it was my mom's idea for me to go to Clarion. It was her idea for me to get an MFA. It was her. I mean, she helped out with this podcast, for example. Like, I had never used Skype before, and she suggested we could use Skype to record interviews over the internet. I was like, wow, you just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Nice one.
So no, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've accomplished, there's just no chance I would have accomplished it without my parents' encouragement. And even like, I think I was telling you, Bruno, my grandmother, I mean, when I first started doing this show, the internet here where I live was so bad I couldn't even do it. And I would just drive over to my grandmother's house every time I needed to record an interview because the internet actually worked over there. So yeah, I mean, it takes this is definitely, it's a family effort in a way, Geek's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my mother was sort of a peripheral fan. Like she sort of enjoyed media, science fiction, and fantasy. Although I didn't identify that until much later. And so that there's sort of that at least peripheral interest. And then once I sort of started working in the field, she's been very supportive. Like she wants to have copies of all my books, and even if she doesn't end up reading them, and she has read some of them, but yeah, she's always been very supportive. One funny thing to me, sort of in retrospect, looking back on my life, I mentioned, when I was like 10, 11, read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it was a really sort of tough time for me. So my stepfather was very strict, and I was like always like grounded and everything. Well, the funny thing is that he was actually a super like geek, and even though like obviously like I was like I don't know we never could connect. It's like we were like oil and water. Like I mean, and I don't think I was like a bad kid per se or whatever, but like I don't know what it was, but it's like he's like he played D&D and he actually wrote a screenplay that was like an epic fantasy story. So I just think it's kind of funny that was my stepdad, and yet somehow we couldn't connect. I do take some pleasure in the fact that actually I was able to, make my actual career out of this, whereas I think he would have loved to have done that himself. But that's just because, like, I take some petty vengeance in that. Oh, I should mention actually, although I never got along with my stepdad, his brother actually was a huge influence on me, and we've remained friends. Not as close as we used to be, but he used to he went to school in Florida, in Orlando, which was a couple hours drive from where I used to live. And so he would come down and he would visit periodically. And like, he was like really important to me in terms of, sort of expanding my horizons. Both for tolerance, of other viewpoints and stuff, because I grew up with, some stupid ideas like a lot of people have, like partially because, that I got from my dad, partially because of, other people in my environment. But, it's like he sort of set me straight on certain things and, made me realize that, you have to have an open mind about all these things, and also just sort of broaden my horizons in terms of music and science fiction, fantasy a little bit, but mostly music and other types of cultural stuff like that. So but I mean he's very important to me. He's like more of a father figure to me than my stepdad ever was, for sure. Sorry if I'm getting like too deep and personal here.
No.
Feel free to cut that stuff if you want.
I love it.
If I tell you that I was listening to Emmylou Harris when I was a kid, you know who I'm talking about, right?
Emmylou Harris?
Yeah.
No, not a fan. Who is that?
Wow, she was I don't know, a country music singer.
Oh, okay.
You don't know her?
No,
Zach,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know country. Sorry.
What about you, Zach?
More rock and punk rock and rap. Also, I'm young, so country's
true.
You know who the Beatles are? That argument doesn't work.
Yeah.
Come on.
Thank you.
I know Johnny Cash. I love Johnny Cash. He's old country.
Yep.
I know Emmylou Harris. She's an amazing vocalist. But if you're not into that genre of music, it's hard for me to imagine that you could actually miss having heard of her, even not listening to that genre.
Yeah, I mean, I may have heard of her. I may have heard like a song of hers or whatever, and just not like ever known her by name. Like, I bet my wife knows who she is because she actually grew up with country.
Oh, so wait, out of 4 Americans, there is one who knows Emmylou Harris. Okay.
Oh, well, let me just tell you, and you guys probably know from the show, but like Dave is never going to know any musical reference whatsoever. Like
that's true.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like at some point he explained like he was essentially like an alien trying to understand human culture when it came to music. Like in high school, it's like he just didn't understand it. He didn't get music or anything, and so like he embarked on this quest to understand the cool music that the cool kids listen to.
I used to watch MTV with a notepad, and I would write down the songs and stuff because I had to memorize them all, so I would know what people were talking about. Yeah.
And that's why he's the host of Geek Guide to the Galaxy. Oh, I should say that I'm really into metal, and the reason I mention it is just because it's been on my mind recently. Is like, so we have some neighbors who live across the street, and like they're like always like playing music in their cars and whatever, and like they have a bouncy castle business, and so they're and they're always in their front yard like talking or like using their equipment to inflate and deflate and vacuum the thing. So it's like they make a lot of noise, and so previously, like, the music has always been like big bass, blasting out the back of the car or whatever as it drives back and forth, or they're sitting idling in front. It's like lately there's a new guy there now who, like, he got a new truck, and like he was blasting Metallica though. And I'm like, no, you can't, it's not fair to torture me with Metallica. Like, because it's like, okay, like when I want to listen to music, I want to listen to music. When I'm trying to do something else, I don't want to listen to somebody else's music. You know what I mean? It's like it drives me crazy. But it's like it just seems so unfair to like then be attacking my peace and quiet with actual Metallica, which is like it's like using something I love to destroy me.
I have a similar situation because I work from home and I'm in the middle of this gentrifying neighborhood, and like once a week, people would ring my doorbell, like when I'm in the middle of work, when I'm doing a meeting or something, and they would be like, "Hey, your lawn is a little high. You want me to mow it?"
Oh
No, get out of here. And we've those people that try to sell what do they call them? It's a specific kind of vacuum, but don't ever let any of those people into your house. like threaten, just like, I'll call the cops if you get anywhere near, because it's so hard to get them out. And I looked up, they were cleaning my carpet or whatever for free, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just on my phone looking at the reviews. Never seen a more low reviewed item online than what they were selling.
Well, you know what's a really highly reviewed item? A Casper mattress.
Oh, I just bought a Casper mattress pillow because I love my Casper mattress. Geeks Guide. What is it? CasperMattress.com/geeks, or no, Galaxy.
Casper.com/Galaxy. And use the promo code Galaxy. You'll get $50 off.
Yeah, it's really good. I have all kinds of animals, and when they jump up on the bed, because it's always just a free-for-all, in the middle of the night, if they jump up on the bed, I don't feel it, unless they actually jump on top of me. So it's really good. Highly recommend it. As I like the inverse of the vacuum.
When will they come to Europe?
What's that?
When will they come to Europe?
Oh, the vacuum.
Casper or the evil vacuum people?
No, the evil vacuum you can keep. Really.
Yeah, it's an American thing only.
See, Zach, in your bio on Starship Sofa, it said that you grew up with cows outside your window.
Oh yeah, I grew up on a ranch. 100 acres, San Antonio, a little north of San Antonio. And yeah, we had cows. We still have cows. If I go over there, we go out and shoot guns and do all the redneck stuff. Not at cows.
Are you in Austin? You're in Austin now, right?
Yeah, I had to get out of San Antonio. That was, I'm not that redneck. I'm pretty progressive, and San Antonio is pretty not progressive. And so I just had to get to Austin. Like, I had been let go from that job, and my wife was, she was getting a promotion, but she was also looking at other jobs, and a librarian position at the state archives in Austin came up, and she applied, and it's like, we should take the job. And that was the week that Writers of the Future flew me out. So very grateful to my wife, who moved all of my stuff while I was having fun with authors, doing writing exercises and stuff. She did all the hard work getting me to Austin.
Yeah, Austin is cool, though. I actually lived there for about a year, and there were a lot of science fiction writers there, too. I mean, it's a really cool place.
Yeah, I love it. I really like, there's always something going on, and the music scene is great, and I'm just very happy. It's like a little oasis in the very, very conservative state. That's why I have to compliment Geek's Guide so much. It's like, I didn't have a whole lot of experience with friends or family being really into reading. And I mean, like I said, video games was like where I got most of my nerd stuff. I was like a geek and a jock in high school. So, or like a gamer and a jock, that's something that's like a real thing now. Like you can do it. It's, yeah, so not a lot of exposure. And I think like a podcast like this can really take someone that's like in an isolated area that doesn't have exposure to like all these amazing just methods of getting these awesome authors on their shelves, and not just authors, obviously TV and the discussion too. So thumbs up.
well, it's interesting because I was talking to Bruno the other day, and he says that he's never actually really played video games at all, but he still listens to the shows where we talk about video games. I think that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's a vision on a world that has never really appealed to me. I think I'm not fast enough and not patient enough at the same time for some of the games and some others. But it's part of what I call geekery. So since I consider myself a geek, it's still a world that I want to know. I think there is also a lot of creativity that I can't touch because the medium is not something that appeals to me. But it seems very, very creative also. Visually and in terms of the story, the intricacy that they seem to be able to put into these games, it seems it's kind of fascinating still.
You guys' episode with Ron Gilbert is one of my favorites.
Oh yeah,
that was a really good one. I love the old adventure game.
So have you been following Thimbleweed Park?
Not closely enough to know like what's happening right now, but yes. I'm really excited. Is it going to be finished soon? Like, do you know any details?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's scheduled for July or August. It should be up pretty soon, yeah. But yeah, so this is a game in the style of Secret of Monkey Island. It's a crowdfunded game from Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick, who did Maniac Mansion, and it's all, it's not, Bruno, you would like it. You don't have to have good reflexes or anything. It's just all about a story and solving puzzles, and it's really, really funny and saying funny things to people. And I love those games so much, and they've been kind of out of style for a while. And I'm just so glad that the crowdfunding has come along and allowed Ron Gilbert to make these kinds of games again.
Telltale Games is I think bringing that adventure style game back into, at least to the modern audience, because I didn't really grow up with those like adventure games that you did, but they're very story focused and like decision driven. Wolf Among Us and Tales from the Borderlands are both really good titles, and if you want great story with like a branching narrative, you'd be hard pressed to find anything better than that, I think.
Have you played their Walking Dead or Game of Thrones games?
Yes, I've played the Walking Dead season 1, and then the one in between season 1 and 2, and then I played episode 1 of Game of Thrones. And they're not, in my opinion, the Game of Thrones one is not as good as the others. It's kind of has like a lot of different narrative paths going on, and I felt like I preferred something more focused. Like Wolf Among Us is like this neo-noir detective story where you're trying to figure out, if you've ever read Fables, the Vertigo comic, it's a prequel to that, and you're investigating a murder. And then Tales from the Borderlands is like an adventure, science fiction, and very comedic.
Did you try to play Kentucky Route Zero?
Kentucky Route Zero. No, is that on Steam or?
I think I downloaded it directly from their website, and it was probably originally crowdfunded, but what isn't these days? But I think they're only to episode 3 of 5, and it's really interesting what they do. Although I have to say it was a bit. There weren't the puzzle aspect of the adventure game was missing for me. It was a bit too much focused on kind of like weird, surreal conversations where you could say really random stuff, which I guess has its appeal in a certain place. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just as a genre, they do seem to be kind of pulling away from the puzzle element, because that's the same as the latest from Telltale Games it's more about zany conversation and less about figuring out a puzzle. I
mean, I like them both, but I miss the puzzles when they completely disappear.
Right, yeah, so do I.
This is a nice drive. Have any of you guys, thought to ask this before, it's so science fictional, and now we're talking about games. Have any of you guys tried virtual reality yet? Have you pre-ordered an Oculus and not received it because none of them are shipping?
Yeah.
I haven't tried it yet. I saw Daniel Wilson tried it, I believe, and but that's as close as I've been to it. Is one degree of separation there. But
I tried last year at PAX, so I'm sure it's more polished now, because I think you can buy an Oculus now.
You can order them and not receive them because they're having shipping problems.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get one just as soon as like respectable developers start developing, or like there's like an indie title that everyone's like, you've got to play this. But right now, I haven't really heard anything like that's out yet.
Yeah.
I think it would be really dangerous to have one of those in my house, not only for me, but like I think my wife might enter the virtual world and then never return. Like if there was a version that was Skyrim or like Elder Scrolls, whatever future Elder Scrolls title there was, if there was one of those and she could just like enter the virtual world, she would like never leave.
It would be like my story, Save Me Please.
Yeah, exactly.
Which you can read over at davidbarkirtley.com.
Or in Press Start to Play.
To Play. Good point, John.
There's another good one that's similar. I forget. It was more of a literary author, and he's like reliving his times in a VR. That was a really good story in Press Start to Play.
Yeah, the T.C. Boyle story.
T.C. Boyle's, right.
Yeah, the Relive box, I believe it's called.
Yes, that was a really good story.
Yeah, I was really excited about that story when I read it, and I was like, why isn't anyone else in the genre talking about this? This is,
It was it was like 1:00 when I started reading that, and then I just ended up finishing the whole story. I was like, oh, what's this?
Mm-hmm.
I had just finished the one before, and then I was like super late and tired the next day, but I was like still thinking about it the whole next day. I was like, man, that's how I want to write a VR story. That's what I want to do. And I have a VR story coming out in Futuristica. It's that's my, I think it's going to be out in August, Futuristica Volume 2. And it's kind of like a Rear Window style story with someone who's disabled and someone who's mostly deaf. Like my father's mostly deaf and kind of, but that doesn't really affect her in VR. And and as also I wrote it took a while to sell, but I wrote it before Gamergate, but then the editor was like, who just recently bought it, was like, man, you got to tie this in with Gamergate because it's like exactly what's happening. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right.
See, Nicolette, have you written any fiction at all? Is that something you're interested in?
I've been playing around with writing from the last year or so, but I haven't, nothing's come of it yet, because, like, my profession is non-fiction writing, so the energy tends to go there, but, maybe someday I'll finish something. We'll see.
And how about Bruno? Do you do any sort of writing? Have you thought about that?
I've thought about it. I'm not sure if it was on the show that someone said, you don't try to write something. You need to write something. You write something. You see what I mean? You remember that?
Yeah.
An author said that. I think it was Anne Leakey, no?
I think it was Yoda, because he said that.
You beat me to it, Dave.
Yeah, because he's a frequent guest. Yoda is a frequent guest on the show. But I mean, but I think that's true of writing fiction. But I mean, do you ever think about just writing movie reviews or book reviews or anything like that?
I think I'm too doubtful about the interest of what I could write to do that. Now, I have some ideas for novels or short stories. Sorry, maybe probably not novels, but I don't know. I've never managed to really go beyond page one, and that's why I was referencing this quote by whomever it was who said it. You might have an idea. It's not because you have an idea. It might be good, but it doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to write it because you don't have this inside you. Am I making sense?
No, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah? Okay.
I think that's really interesting, though, because I mean, I think that most podcasts about books and interviewing authors and things are mostly only listened to by aspiring authors or other authors. And I always wanted Geek's Guide to the Galaxy to be something that would reach out beyond that and interest people in science fiction, get more people reading science fiction, and not just be appealing to authors. So,
even though I must say, a lot of the stuff that I hear, they give extensive information about their creative process, and that was really fascinating for me. So I wonder how far beyond my simply being a reader it goes. I mean, I studied literature at the beginning when I went to university. I'm kind of versed in the creative techniques and all that. So it's always something that I've had in my mind. Writing is another story.
Yeah. Well, actually, Nicolette, I mean, we mentioned at the beginning that you said that you really wanted to be on Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Was there anything when you imagined it that you wanted to talk about, like what topics you thought would be really cool to discuss, or anything that you're personally really passionate about, or anything like that?
Well, I've been focusing a lot of my reading and talking lately, the last year or so, on post-apocalyptic stuff, because, well, some of it's really good, some of it's utter crap that's just kind of repetitive power fantasy stuff that I really don't need to read another clone book of. But I'm kind of fascinated with the, why do people even like it? Why do I like it? Why do I like reading about everything being destroyed? And I've just been examining that question really closely. That's definitely one of my, little pet obsessions. But you guys have done some nice panels on the topic.
Yeah, well, we have a leading expert on post-apocalyptic fiction right here on our panel.
Yeah. I did pontificate on that very question in both the introductions to Wastelands 1 and 2. Yeah, I mean, it definitely is an interesting question. I mean, I wondered about it myself as well. And, yeah, I mean, as far as, I don't know, what got you interested in post-apocalyptic fiction? I mean, for me, it was actually, the game Wasteland and then Fallout later. And then I started reading after that. But what were your sort of keystones in that genre?
Let's see. I think the very first one I read was probably Canonical for Levelwitz, of course. Which is weirdly, it's my mom's favorite book ever. And so she gave me her copy and was like, I love this book. And that was the very first one that got me interested. And I mean, there's so many cool imaginative possibilities in it, of course. It's just wipe the slate clean and do whatever you want, basically. So there's a lot of appeal there. I ended up getting really into SM Sterling's Dies the Fire Never Ending bullshit, which I love and also hate at the same time because it's got some issues. Yeah. But I really enjoy kind of the the whole weirdness that he builds up there. And then there's another one called Into the Forest by Gene Hegland, which is actually one of the very, very few post-apocalyptic books I have ever read that it is not just about the world's over, let's try to rebuild it exactly as it was before as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. Where I'm just like, everything's over. Can't we do something like way cooler now? And I don't know. So those were some of the starting books, and I'll get into the like romantic aesthetic of ruins and stuff like that. So there's probably a couple elements that draw me into it, but I just started sort of studying it obsessively to see what people have done with it, and like what was happening in history when the big booms in post-apocalyptic literature were happening, and was there a connection there and stuff like that. It's pretty fascinating. I enjoyed your anthologies on the subject there. I'm a hard sell when it comes to short stories, but
I read your review of it, and I saw that you like People of Sand and Slag quite a bit, and that was probably my favorite story in that anthology as well.
That was so weird. Oh, I love that story. It was so good. Yeah.
I just recently watched, I'm a huge fan of post-apocalyptic everything, and kind of what got me on it was Fallout 3 came out. I was a freshman in college, and I had all of the freedom. And so I was actually a graphic design major, so I didn't have that much freedom. But I ended up getting that game at midnight and just playing it so much. But just the other night, I watched a movie that I didn't know was a kind of a post-apocalyptic film, but Things to Come, H.G. Wells. Has anyone seen that?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I highly recommend it. It's a really good film. I think it was in 1936, so it's older.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so if you want to see like old like imagery of pre-World War II thoughts on the apocalypse, that's your movie, and it's fantastic, and it's like go science, fuck yeah. I love it. It's like super positive about science, which is usually a lot of times, like with Paolo Bacigalupi, not the case in a lot of science, like post-apocalyptic. So that's what I really loved about that movie. And it felt so pertinent, even though it's like 100 years old.
All right, cool. So I think we should probably start wrapping this up pretty soon. I guess just the last thing I want to ask you guys is, do you have any suggestions for Geek's Guide to the Galaxy? Or, I mean, a lot of people say that they listen to the show and they wish they could interact and respond and stuff. And so that's kind of one of the things I hope we've accomplished with this episode. But I wonder sometimes, should we have a message board or, some way that fans could connect with each other and talk to each other or something like that. So I don't know. I'm just curious if you guys have any suggestions along those lines. So Bruno, what do you think? Any suggestions for us? Like, I mean, if there was a message board, is that something you'd be interested in, or are you just perfectly happy listening to the podcast?
No, I think I'm perfectly happy with listening to the podcast, and I'm very happy that you have transcripts. I think some of the panels should have transcripts also, because sometimes I try to find references to, like, I'm pretty sure that after the Chana Mieville interview, there is one of you guys mentions something about him saying that he told his girlfriend told him that the fridge man was coming the day after. Yeah, right? That's really stuck in my mind, because I'm exactly like this. I mean, you were talking about growing up with cows, and I was imagining cows coming to the table and serving breakfast and stuff like that,
Yes. So just for people who don't remember that, so China Mieville said that his girlfriend at one point said to him, "The refrigerator men are coming tomorrow," and he imagined these like half refrigerator, half man guys showing up at the door. And he said there's basically, two kinds of people: the kind of people who just imagine guys coming to fix the refrigerator, and people who imagine the mutant refrigerator hybrid guys. Okay, but so transcripts, okay.
Transcripts are good. Message board, I don't think I would come. I'm not sure. References would be nice. I'm not sure that you have them. Like, for example, the things that Nicolette mentioned, the title that Nicolette mentioned, I think some of them I would like to have.
Mm-hmm.
Or even the others, by the way, but probably a list of sources would be nice also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
That's probably something that I miss.
Well, actually, on our website, if you go to, I think we still have. We had a link where I had an intern for a while going through and just listing all the books and stories and things that we mentioned in each episode. I mean, I think it's like 100 episodes out of date now, but we have tried to do that in the past.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people actually have requested that. So yeah, I think that's a good thing to have.
Yep. Now, apart from that, no communicating with others. No, listening to the podcast is very good. It's my weekly pleasure.
All right, cool. So Nicolette, any suggestions for us?
No, I don't think I would need a message board or anything like that. Although the only thing that comes to mind is really out of your control, because sometimes it's frustrating that like I never see your Facebook posts, and that has nothing to do with you. It has to do everything to do with the bullshit on Facebook. But no, you guys are kicking ass, so keep up the good work.
All right, cool. Zach, any ideas for us?
Bonus content for subscribers? I don't know what it would be. I don't know how you would manage that. Probably be pretty difficult.
Well, I mean, Patreon actually makes it easy to put bonus things on Patreon, but then we have the issue of the people who support us through PayPal, so we'd have to have some other way to get bonus content to them. But
well, and what would it be? And
yeah.
A couple of podcasts that I subscribe to they have like a tiered system. So someone gives, and theirs is all through PayPal. But like at a certain amount a month, you unlock this bonus show or whatever, bi-weekly or once a month show. I don't know how difficult I'm sure that would be a ton of work, but I mean, could be what turns the lights on. I don't know.
All right, cool. So doing an additional bi-weekly or monthly show, that would be a little bit outside my capabilities right now. But no, I definitely think some sort of bonus content for people who support the show is an interesting idea that I'd love to do if I could just think of something good.
Like a show where everyone is just like laughing the whole time and stuttering and like, have you ever collected that stuff, or you probably just delete it and throw it in the trash can? Yeah,
unfortunately, I mostly just delete the old stuff. I do have a couple outtakes. Like I have this one. I think I mentioned it in episode 100 that I was going to release it, and now it's episode 200 and I still haven't released it. But there's this thing where there was this lightning storm going on when John and I were trying to interview Ryan North, and it's pretty funny. So maybe I'll make that available as that's premium content to our biggest subscribers. They can hear the lightning storm.
I'm sure that they would, people like me, I would love like that super informal, very laxed on editing type content. Not necessarily a show, but whatever it is, it's just a little something else for people that, love the show so much that they're willing to keep listening through the flubs and stuff.
I was going to say, I always imagine that Dave actually does keep a file of all of my screw-ups, because there's so many that he edits out. And so he's just got a file, he just copies it, he cuts them and pastes them into this other audio file, and he just has a string of all of my, whatever screw-ups that I make, and he's just going to use it as blackmail material at some point, and
No, John, it would take literally millions of years to assemble something like that. Nobody's got that kind of time.
Another suggestion I would make, maybe you interviewed Cecil Baldwin.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could have other people doing podcasts. Like, I was thinking of Aaron Minky, obviously, considering the genre. There is also the ones who make the black tapes, and there are a couple of people who make very interesting podcasts in the genre that you might review also.
Yeah, that's a really good. I thought about that. Yeah, but yeah, like Aaron Mahnke and there was another one. I can't remember, but I had in mind to like maybe interview people who do Dungeons and Dragons podcasts, where you actually play Dungeons and Dragons and they record it and stuff like that. But yeah, I would like to talk to more podcasters because I think I really enjoy podcasts, and I think there would be a good crossover promotion kind of opportunity.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe I'll give more thought to that.
There's also the people who make Limetown, which was not an interesting. And, you had Cecil Baldwin, but maybe it would be interesting to have the people behind the scene at Welcome to Night Vale. And I get there a little bit like stars at this moment.
Yeah, well, and they just wrote a book.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, that was that was on our list. I mean, obviously, there's like, there's like so many things that we want to do that we just can't fit into the schedule. But yeah, I would love to talk to them at some point.
They also started another second podcast called Alice is Not Dead.
Mhm.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to listen to it. Have you listened to it?
I've started listening to the first episode and I found it difficult to bear. I couldn't stand it, really. Not the first episode. Too much noise in my ears. I mean, it was brilliantly edited, but for me, very difficult to listen to.
Mm.
I'll have to talk to them about that then. I'll be like, so my listener Bruno Hanquier, he says it's just like you couldn't even stand it. Like, what do you think about that?
Please answer.
Yeah, make sure you when you post the link to this episode on Twitter, you tag them just so that they some great stuff about this episode in there.
There was that reminds me of a question that I had been wanting to ask you. I don't know if we are almost out of time, but you're an outspoken atheist. Do you ever find that you have to censor yourself, like just per the audience, or just because you might want to interview someone in the future or partner with someone?
Not real. I mean, like I try not to get. I mean, obviously, I have some of my political opinions and stuff on the show. I try not to go like too crazy with that, just because I want the focus to be on geek stuff and science fiction and things. But I wouldn't say I censor myself particularly. I was actually just interviewed on this podcast called Secular Stories, where it's they interview atheists and we talk a lot about politics. So if you want more of my unfiltered political opinions, you could go check that out. But no, I wouldn't say I ever really worry about getting people in the future or anything. I don't care that much.
Well, I mean, given the number of episodes we've actually done, with deep criticisms of various biblical movies and things like that, like I think he's probably fine airing that laundry out there. That atheism, whatever. But
yeah, well, and it's funny too, because I mean, yeah, like sometimes when we do those, when we review the biblical movies or something, I mean, maybe like 2 people will be unhappy about that. But then like when I said I didn't like Force Awakens, oh my god, 50 people.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no.
I'm way more afraid of the Star Wars fundamentalists than anyone else.
Yeah, Dave, you got some flack for that one.
But you got my support.
Okay. Oh, thank you. All right, cool. So I think we'll wrap things up there. So we've been speaking with Zach Chapman, Nicolette Stewart, and Bruno Hanquier, and of course John Joseph Adams is here. So guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Always good to be here.
And that concludes episode 200 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Big thanks again to Zach Chapman, Nicolette Stewart, and Bruno Hanquier for joining us. And big thanks as well to everyone out there in podcast land for listening. We definitely couldn't have made it through 200 episodes without the support of everyone who's downloaded our shows, posted reviews on iTunes, written us fan mail, supported us through Patreon and PayPal, bought stuff from our sponsors, and just generally spread the word about Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. We really, really appreciate all of it. So, as always, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of Wired.com. For more information about the show, visit geeksguideshow.com. To learn more about your host, visit davidbarrkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by yours truly, Jack Kincaid. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.